Okay, hi. My name's Dave Calvert. My company has been translating magazines and print material for quite a few years now. I'm going to talk about using memoQ to deal with files from InDesign, which is the most widely used print publishing software. It's also used for a lot of content that's intended for partly or exclusively digital distribution. So first of all, I'll go into some background about the software and printing terminology. So InDesign's been around for quite a while. Version 4 introduced the IDML file format. Version 6 was the last perpetually licensed version. It's now part of Creative Cloud, along with Acrobat, InCopy, Photoshop, and a lot more. Creative Cloud's subscription only. The current version is InDesign 2024, version 19.4. Version number doesn't necessarily indicate the year, and that can make the upgrade process a bit confusing. INDD, InDesign document, is the native file format, and IDML, InDesign markup language, is a form of XML that's used to transfer layouts between different versions of InDesign. It's also used by third-party applications like memoQ, and it can be read and written by most versions of InDesign. So we're talking about DTP, which involved from printing, so there's a lot of print terminology used by InDesign and by the IDML filter. So we start with a typeface. It's a family of fonts, a collection of fonts with an overall design. Maybe Futura or Calibri, whatever. A font's a collection of characters belonging to a typeface in a specific style. This might be a weight, light, heavy, medium, bold, demi. It might be italic, and so on. A typeface can include 10 or more fonts, quite commonly. And you have a glyph, which is a representation of a character in a font. You use that to produce text, which normally comes in strips called galleys. They're columns with the final line breaks and the hyphenation. If you use InCopy, you have a galley view available for copy editing. If you're a designer, you'll use a lot of dummy text, and that's said to be Greeked. Single lines standing alone at the top or the bottom of a column are called widows and orphans, and designers don't like them. So before DTP, layouts were made from paper galleys and paper graphics, which were pasted up to make pages and spreads, called camera-ready artwork. This was done on a pasteboard. InDesign's working area is also called the pasteboard, and designers still like to leave things lying around on it. Parent pages, previously master pages, were renamed by Adobe in CC 2022. They're usually used to define a uniform look for a section or for an entire publication. Parent pages are often designed with dummy images and text. The text used may be Greeked or a version of a real text. A spread, 2 facing pages, can be a single page, can be a fold-out with 3 or more pages. Text in InDesign comes in stories, which consist of 1 or 2 linked text frames. The frames are placed on layers, and the layers can be visible or hidden. There might be separate layers for graphics or for instructions for the printer. And sometimes layouts designed specifically for localization can have a layer for each language. InDesign uses lots of tags. Many of these tags are specific to the source language text, so you don't want to import them. Others are not language specific, and you have to preserve them in the target version. A lot of tags control the typography, and they often locally override the style settings. Filter allows you to select which tags you want to keep. And if you regularly get InDesign jobs, you'll soon settle on specific filter configurations for regular jobs for people you know. The filter has 2 tabs, one controlling the imported content, what gets imported, and the other one controlling the formatting and special characters, how it gets imported. The first tab, the imported content tab, is the what. The first part of the tab controls the import of parent pages. It uses the text import stories on master pages, the old name. That controls whether or not you import the text on the parent pages. But it imports the text on the parent pages that are actually applied to normal pages in the publication. Import stories on invisible master pages actually refers to stories on parent pages that are not applied to pages in the publication. You can select which parent page spreads are to be imported, and Adobe are currently changing this part of InDesign, so you may need to check exactly how this works. The potential danger here is that parent pages often contain a mixture of real text and dummy text. Like parent pages, they can have layers. The next section controls the import of layers, used for alternative or different language versions of text, instructions for printing, whatever. Here, visible layers are imported by default if invisible layers are not. You can select which invisible layers are to be imported. Page items are called objects in InDesign. They include text and graphic frames. Visible page items imported by default, invisible page items not. These settings also affect layers and objects on parent page spreads. Importing page items in order of appearance is very helpful, and it usually gets it right. Not always, because of the way InDesign assigns names to frames. References, variables, and conditional texts, I'm going to leave that because I don't deal with them very often. And you have a checkbox to tell Language Terminal to export a PDF preview. Second tab is the Formatting and Special Characters tab, how things get imported. You have a section which controls the import of typographic tags. Obviously, it controls the number of tags in your imported text, and you have the danger of damaging the layout if you don't import the necessary ones. First checkbox, treat semi-bold as bold. I never use it. The typefaces are normally controlled by the styles and the tags. Maintain locally defined tracking. I don't usually check this. Tracking is the spacing between a number of letters, and it's usually language specific. It's often used for copy fitting. And local just means it's an override to a style. Kerning, unlike tracking, is the space between two specific letters. You need to preserve this if the text is a non-translatable, for example, a headline or a trade name used as a logo, because the designer will probably have hand-kerned the individual letters. Obviously, if you have InDesign, you can leave it unchecked and just copy any untranslatable kerned text over. Maintain locally defined baseline shifting. Mostly harmless, sometimes vital. It's best to preserve it, as some designers use it for superscripts and subscripts instead of using the built-in formats. It's also sometimes used for inline graphics, such as an app button or, whatever. Web page symbols quite often used there. Locally defined vertical scale and horizontal scale, not usually, not often used. Leave it. Locally defined skew. Sometimes an italic font won't be available, so the designer will skew the letters. If it's there, you probably want to preserve those tags. Locally defined leading. That's the spacing between lines. It's called leading because in metal typesetting, the setters used to hammer strips of lead in between the lines of type. A good starting point for this tab is to check maintain locally defined baseline shifting and maintain locally defined leading, because those are the two that will get you into trouble most often. The three special character settings affect the segmentation, the number of tags, and the format of the translated layout. A badly formatted original can cause you problems, and you may need to fix the original text in InDesign or to split and join segments in memoQ. The filter gives you the choice of ignore, inline tag, or break segment for each of these characters. The line separator, the new line, well, sometimes designers use this to keep a heading with a paragraph of body copy. That can be a problem. Sometimes they use it to get a pretty right margin. The best way of dealing with it will depend on how it's been used throughout the document. You can get an idea, but you really need InDesign to see what's going on there. The paragraph separator, the hard return, that's usually set to break segment. The tab character, if you've got a lot of tables in your text that are made with the InDesign table editor, then you may want to put a tag in for the tab character, particularly if there's tabs have been used for formatting inside table cells. Otherwise, you'll want to break the segment on a tab, because if you've got a lot of tables done using just tab stops, you don't want the whole line of the table coming in as a single segment. This is just round-tripping what looks like a perfectly normal headline, paragraph, and tab table. But of course, if you don't use a new line to separate lines, you can always use a hard return. And here we've got using too many new lines. Now, what I did here was round trip these texts with maintain locally defined baseline shift and maintain locally defined leading checked. And then I simply use different settings for the tagging and breaking, etc. What I found interesting was that one combination of settings mangled things quite badly. You can see that the leading has been split. The locally defined leading for the headline has been taken over into the first line of the paragraph. These, the blue boxes, they just show segmentation that could be improved, and of course the result of tagging the tabs. Now, another common problem you might come across is too much text. 4-page PDF, about 700 words. The analysis says there's 2,600 and something words, 1,700 repetition. So you should always do a quick visual check, even against a PDF or whatever, to make sure that the analysis is plausible. Where the text is hiding. Well, things left lying around on the pasteboard. An overset text box. Overflow from this story here. Here, let's see. We've got the same thing happening on a parent page, and we've got dummy text in a parent page. Sometimes designers use an alternative version of the text, an old version of the text, or a rough version, as a as a dummy. And then it can be difficult if you're working in InDesign to know whether you're working on the right version of the text or the wrong one. And then you've got you've got a wonderful feature here that if you have a story, which is a number of linked text boxes, and any one of those text boxes is visible, then the filter will automatically import the whole story. And that one text box might be hidden behind a graphic. So the only thing you can do there is look for the overflow marker. So, formats. InDesign document changes with every major program version. InDesign can save files in its version of InDesign NDD and as HTML. It can't reliably read INDD files saved by later versions. IDML can be written and read by InDesign starting from version 4 and by memoQ, among others. But it doesn't preserve plugin information, and it keeps the links to the graphics, but it doesn't preserve the graphics themselves in the INDD. So that's why you always need a PDF of the layout with the pictures as it appears, as well as an IDML. If you use INDD files and language terminal, you will always get the target document in the current version of InDesign. If your designer doesn't have the current version installed, then they'll have to convert it or download the old version. This gets to be a problem with publishing systems, which are always 1 or 2 versions behind. If you use language terminal, you can also get a preview, PDF preview. Now, a little hiccup, if you're working with IDML and you import an IDML file which happens to contain the text string .indd somewhere in the file name, you won't be able to export that from the project manager client, because it'll tell you need to go through language terminal. But if you go to the server dashboard, then you can export it fine. So that's one that can give you a fright. And then fonts. It's very, very unlikely that you'll have access to the fonts actually used in the document. So if you're using language terminal to get a preview, don't count on the lengths being right. This shows you there we have a Google font and we've got overflow because of this problem. You've got the fonts and the links to the link to the graphic all correctly preserved in the target. This is actually the target document. And it was exported in 2024, 19.3, although the document was originated in 2023. These are just the error messages that you'll get in InDesign if you have a version problem. if you have a font problem, the font information is very, very comprehensive, very useful. Now, I mentioned InCopy earlier. It's a very cut-down version of InDesign intended solely for copy editing. It's useful as part of a publishing system. Its file format is ICML. It can't save or open InDesign document or IDML files. There is a memoQ filter for ICML, but I haven't been able to get it to work with a recent ICML file. That may be because all my InCopy files come from a publishing system, one or the other. I did succeed in opening a very old ICML from 2014. InCopy can export PDF files, but only in high resolution, so you get a large file size. That's assuming that you're working from a system where the graphics are in there, if you're in a publishing system. And you can't access the layout geometry, so it really is purely for word processing. So, you really need InDesign to fix things that would make your life difficult or that would annoy the customer. To fix formatting problems before and after translation, to tidy things up, to remove new lines, discretionary hyphens, which create tags, and to minimize the number of tags and to maximize the number of matches. You can find and you can remove overset text, you can clean up the pasteboard, and you can tidy up the parent pages. If you don't have access to InDesign, then ask for an IDML and a PDF so you can see what's going on. Check your analysis and your imported source text against the PDF. Look for excess text and bad segmentation. Use Language Terminal, not only to convert INDD to IDML, but also to export PDF previews. You can use pseudo-translation to see if you're actually capturing all of the text. Angelica talked about this yesterday. Where pseudo-translation won't help you is to give you solid information on the lengths, because the fonts will probably be substituted, and even a single-digit difference in the font version can lead to the text no longer breaking the same way. You can also try to get your hands on an old perpetual license, CS6, for example. That'll read and write IDML, and then you can apply a lot of fixes to poorly formatted source text. And target, come to that. And if all else fails, subscribe to CC. It's expensive, but if you're a small group or you do a lot of design work, then it makes sense. Right. Any questions? One point. The slides on the filter, yours got a pile of handouts which just contain those examples and how I set the things up. So that might be helpful if anybody needs to work out what it was I said.